Welcome to Grow with Purpose. This is the podcast that we do at Axiom that talks about the challenges that business owners face. We actually get to talk to some of those business owners, and we have one on our program today. He fills two roles. He's a business owner. He's also a subject matter expert. Welcome, Chris. This is Chris Spurvey. So, Chris, thanks for taking the time to join us on the podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome, Joey. I've been looking forward to this. It's one of those things. Yeah, when you put yourself out there, great things can come from it. So that's like a ripple effect. So let's dive in. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
So tell us a little bit about Chris, your area of expertise, and why I wanted you to come on the podcast.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess you and I have a relationship going back probably a year now where, you came to me as an owner of a consultancy looking to scale and grow your firm. And it just so happens that that's what I do focus on. And maybe I can just begin the narrative a little bit. Maybe 15 years ago, I was, struggling to grow a consulting business, focusing on business development as best I could, without a whole lot of training around how to actually grow sales and marketing within a firm. So I created a lot of road rash through that process, but we did manage to get some momentum, and we sold the business. And I'm obviously condensing this story down, but because I mean there's a lot of little nooks and crannies, so to speak, to go down. But we sold the firm in 2013 to KPMG. Hard to believe now. It's over 10 years ago. And I had to go work for KPMG for a number of years where I was vice president of growth and helping that big firm grow. And around 2017, I decided to leave that big firm. I just wasn't wired to work for a big bureaucratic organization. And I started my business, it started as Chris Spurvey Consulting Inc., but eventually morphed into what I call today niche consulting growth. Helping owners, founders of boutique consulting firms scale and grow their businesses. Combination of ongoing cadence and accountability, but let's get focused on driving opportunities. And to drive opportunities, we need to create new relationships. So that's really what I've been focused on, and it's been a wonderful journey. I'm a one-person show, working one-on-one with clients. So I would say I'm down the middle between a coach and a consultant, with a very specific focus on, I'll call it human to human selling.
So when business owners seek you out or they find you, what in your experience are, say, the top two or three problems as they would articulate them?
Yeah, well, I mean, in my world, and again, I live this, so I know the pains because I was the owner of this type of a business. And we used to sit around the board table saying, why is revenue one month up and the next month is down, or one quarter is up and the next quarter is down? And I was able to see very quickly that when you're busy, you're not focusing on business development. And then when you're not busy, you have to focus on business development. So you're in reaction mode. And, consultants in my world, consultants are not, wired to be selling consistently. So the words that I put on it, and it turns out a lot of people use it, is the feast or famine cycle. It's up and down revenue cycles. So that's a real pain when in a consulting world, because we don't drive towards a repeatable sales process, and we don't do business development when we don't think we need to, or we're too busy. Another problem I do find in a people-based business is that, like, how fast should we scale on the people side without the booked revenue to support it? And so you go out and you start hiring a bunch of people, and then because you have ambitions to scale and grow, so you can maybe extract yourself a little bit from the doing. And sometimes you can get out ahead of that, or get too far ahead of yourself, and so you end up with what I'll call it a game of spinning plates. You got all your people on sticks as plates, and you're trying to get them all spinning. And when you get maybe down to two or three people, and you think you got the last plate spinning, all of a sudden the project ends. And so then how do you scramble to replace that to get those plates back spinning? and so on. So it's a real tricky game of spinning plates. So feast or famine, spinning plates is what I would say. And then I guess another piece is, I find in this services based business, there's kind of thresholds that you gotta navigate. A $2 million business scaling beyond that is a different um, can of worms than moving from a $2 million business to a $10 million business, or even a $2 million business to a $5 million business. And you got to kind of focus on different elements of the business to do that. So it's a tricky game. Um, and maybe I'll throw in a fourth one. I do find as firms, businesses grow, um, the owner who perhaps was a subject matter expert, him or herself, they weren't necessarily wired to be business owners. They were wired to be subject matter experts. And we all know the growing of a business is very different than the execution of a project. So taking off the doing hat and changing it into a business owner hat are two very different things.
Yeah, I think when you're describing in terms of feast or famine, I see our advisors see in businesses that are probably more prevalent in professional services businesses that typically have not invested in a sales force.
Mm.
And so, if you roll the clock back and say, okay, well, let's say the business is going to hire their first professional salesperson, they very quickly realize we don't have any professional sales processes behind that person.
Oh,
And
no.
so, part of you wants to roll the clock back maybe 5 years and say, well, how much more effective would you have been at selling if you just had the process in place and
Right.
then had 4 or 5 years to tweak and refine and tune that process before you tried to scale it up, adding people? So I think professional services very much fits into that subject matter expert. We're
Absolutely.
doing the work and then trying to sell the work, do the work, try to sell the work. So what is your approach? And we could talk about maybe first we could talk about the solopreneur, or maybe the main producer who's maybe got a couple of support people that are helping with administrative stuff, so he can focus on more of the billable, if you will, stuff. And what is your process or what is your approach for helping to define a process that isn't I've got some spare time. I don't have billable work to do. So now I need to go to a networking event, or now I need to go
Mm.
make some phone calls, and then move on to what happens when there's two or three producers, and is it any different? What's your approach there?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe I'll make a bold statement out of the gate and say in professional services across the board, I have found the hiring of a salesperson who is dedicated specifically to the opening of doors and trying to sell. Uh, 99% of the time that fails miserably.
Hmm.
And salespeople are good at selling themselves to professional services firm owners. They have the ability to sell themselves, and they sell themselves based on their Rolodex of connections that they can open doors to and whatnot. And like I said, I've probably seen this play out three or 400
Well,
times.
those
And
professional services business owners, they're an easy mark for that too, right? Because they say,
absolutely.
here's somebody who's coming in the door that says they love to do the thing that I hate. So I'm
I
more than
hate
happy to get this off my plate.
Absolutely, you got it. So they fall victim very quickly. So um, my advice first and foremost is that the best sellers of professional services are the actual doers themselves, and so the consultants are the best salespeople because trust, baked into a professional services sales process, or the maybe better put, not the sales process, the buying process. So rather than as firms we look at things through the lens of how should we sell, it really should be looked at through the lens of how do people buy professional services. And they buy professional services based on a trust, based on credibility, and then a gap in their organization that based on the, the not the relationship that they have developed with a human. They see the bridge of that gap, and so, you know, I would say first and foremost that, we, as owners of professional services firms, we need to take on a culture that everybody is in sales, and that's what consulting is. Otherwise, the people we hire should be employees for, the ideal clients that we're trying to get, because they're not they just have decided they're not going to sell, they're not going to do this stuff. So I guess hopefully I'm being clear there. Culturally, professional services firms should embrace, right from a solopreneur right up through, that we all sell. And yes, when we hire some junior people, we get them started, we build their confidence, we share with them the processes that we as fellow consultants have found work. And we kind of go from there, but we grow them. It's all about growing them into seasoned partners. And that's why, this whole there is a reason why these big firms scale and grow. It's because they have the hierarchical structure that rewards newbies, people graduating from university with the base knowledge. They hire these people, and then they grow them into, from what is it, like something like junior consultant into
Mm-hmm.
manager, into directors, into partners. And you'll find in big firms, the ones that own all the relationships, for the most part, the big relationships, are these partners who have come up through the ranks, and have learned how to do business development, the way humans should do business development, in the selling of a cadence or a trust-based offer. So where does that leave us in our conversation? I mean, it really, if okay, a solopreneur needs a solopreneur who is a consultant providing a service to a client. They need to embrace the idea that they should be time blocking every week a couple of hours to be doing business development, and to be able to, in that time block, know what they're going to do before they go and do it. So that would be number one. And then relationship building. Um, but then as firms grow, the owners need to still do that, because they lead by example. And you're a great example of this. You're doing it, and you're leading by example for the rest of the consultants on your team. And now they're following suit with you, right? And growing their knowledge and expertise around this. And the beautiful thing about it is that when we do it this way, we get to go in front of clients, and we're not just salespeople. I jokingly call it, we're not just sales maggots. We're true subject matter experts, and we can talk the talk, and we actually know them. We know it. Now, let me be clear. It's not to say at some point we don't say, you know what, we need a coordinator of all this efforts. So, the next echelon in growth of a firm, let's look at bringing in a coordinator who can pick up all the pieces of our consultants and the owner, and can get the proposals going, and can make sure Joey follows up on time, and help you organize your time block,
Mm-hmm.
And the beautiful thing about that is, when you bring on a coordinator, is you can nurture them and grow them into becoming a subject matter expert, so they can follow suit and maybe jump over to being a consultant at some point in time in the future. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'll just stop and take a breath there and say that's what I find works.
Yeah, I think that last point's important, because there's always going to be more demands on your time than you have
I
opportunity to
know.
fulfill. So prioritizing things like call blocking, so that you can do outreach to existing referral sources or
Yes,
new leads or cold calling. If you don't have a good handle on your time, then that's never going to happen. So just my
absolutely.
biggest probably bang for the buck in terms of what a CEO could invest in, and this is regardless of industry, company size, could be 30 million, 40 million, $50 million company. If that CEO doesn't have an executive assistant, who can
Absolutely.
help with some of that stuff. And in this case, we're talking about one of the highest and best uses for a consultant being doing business development. For a CEO, it might be a highest and best use of doing one-to-ones with their direct reports. And if an executive
Exactly.
assistant can block and tackle to make sure that time happens.
You
I've
got it.
also seen, like when you're talking about the coordination piece, I've seen this. I think law firms have gotten better at this than any other single industry that I could point to. Um, the ones who do it well, they all try to hire a marketing coordinator, but you can kind of divide them into two groups. And I'm talking, usually you see this around maybe four partners, another four associates, so maybe somewhere in the 8 to 10 attorney range. They're like, okay, we need business development has to be something that these four junior associates learn, and it's something that the four partners have to be held accountable to, right? Because they're
Yeah.
all going to get busy. So they hire a marketing coordinator, and when it doesn't work, it's that person going out there and repping the firm to the public, and nobody's interested in hearing from the marketing coordinator of a law firm.
No.
The ones that
No.
do work, you know who that person is. They may have sat in on a meeting, but their day consists of reaching out to trade associations, professional associations that are looking for speakers, that are looking for subject matter experts to lead workshops, that are calling other law firms that don't specialize in the area that they do, and setting up meetings between the partners to coordinate referral opportunities. And then there's a huge reporting aspect of it where those eight, in this example, those eight attorneys, a part of their weekly management meeting is the business development that's led by the marketing coordinator, comes in for that part of the meeting, hands out the reports and says, okay, here's where everybody's at in terms of weekly touches, outgoing calls, speaking engagements, that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And to your point, it is purely a support and coordination role, but it can't be undervalued because or overvalued, because without it, everybody just kind of results to the mean of the number of billable hours they need to hit their comp target for the
Exactly.
year.
Yeah, and business development is being done off the side of the desk, and it's the first thing that falls off because they are that we are not wired to be attracted to the thing that has the most resistance in our lives, and so we let it fall off. And I always say in professional services, our revenue is a lagging indicator to the lead the is a lagging indicator to the leading indicators of what we've done 3 to 4 months prior.
Hmm.
So if you are not doing the business development, you're going to see it in your revenue 3 to 4, maybe 6 months down the road. So the consistency is so important. So therefore, that coordinator is a massive role, massive value add role in an organization.
One of the things that you and I have had conversations about is the messaging.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is another area that, one of the reasons that you've been so successful is because this is so prevalent in the world you play in, where subject matter experts see everything as a problem to solve,
Yes.
and approach things like through the process that we're going to use to solve it, or they give away a lot of free consulting, maybe in the first couple of meetings to try to, one, they can't help themselves, they're great problem solvers, but two, they're trying to prove value early, but they're not, for some reason, that solution oriented discussion or process oriented discussion isn't perceived as value add by the prospect. And
Mm.
we get frustrated that they don't close immediately or they take too long to close. And when you think about messaging and how folks, when they start interacting with you, where their messaging is at versus the evolution of that messaging to become more successful in resonating with the prospects and getting to the close, what are some of the things that you see early on, and how do those need to change in order for the messaging to be more effective?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's after about a year of doing what I'm doing, today. So I'm going back to probably 2019 now. It was before the pandemic. I was looking at my clients and I was helping them with the cadence, the accountability, and whatnot. And I looked at them and we were making some progress, but they were they were making progress because they were finally doing things consistently. So
Mm-hmm.
let's be clear, doing something is better than doing nothing, and it's going to move the needle. But they had bigger ambitions, you know. My clients wanted to double in size and things like that over a 2 to 3 year period, and so I started looking at, well, what's the problem? And I thought, you know what, the problem is they're all in what I guess there's a really good book out there called The Blue Ocean Strategy. They're all swimming in a red ocean, a bunch of sharks who are calling themselves the same things, and they're there's nothing to separate them from the other one down the road, kind of thing, change management consultant, lean consultant. So if you ask someone what they do, I'm the owner of a lean Six Sigma consultancy. But what does that mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I realized was that if we're going to take it to the next level, we got to figure out what are the problems, what are the true problems that we solve for clients, and what is the language of that problem, not from our consultants speak, because we love to speak in our own unique languages. But that's not the language that our CEO buyer or whoever on the client side is speaking at this moment in time. And I used an example earlier, feast or famine. If 5 years ago, if someone said, Chris, what do you do? Oh, I'm a growth strategist for boutique consultancies, or I'm a growth strategist for consulting firms. Pretty low energy to that, right? Oh, that's interesting. Keep going. But if I'm instead, I react to that question. Well, Chris, what do you do? And this person is my ideal client. And I say, well, I really help owners of consulting firms overcome the feast or famine cycles that are an epidemic in the consulting space. And if he or she is in the consulting world, they're going to lean in and
Mm-hmm.
say, well, God, how do you do that? And then we're off to the races with a conversation, and that's what we want. I always say we want to try do our best to land on second base in a conversation as opposed to first, second, third, and whatnot. So finding that right hook or that right message is really important. I mean, to round that out and say, what I've found with almost every consulting firm, when you do a good analysis of past and current clients, and you look at every single engagement through the lens of the problem that the client had in their words, you can pretty quickly start to extrapolate and hypothesize what are the potential hooks or messages that can get people to lean in. And I find across the board, when you do that, that allows you to fast track buying processes in consulting services, because for the first time, the receiver is saying, my God, he or she is like a fly on my wall. They must have been listening to me last night as I was losing sleep, because I'm tired of winning work and not being profitable at the end of the day, for example,
Mm-hmm.
right? So anyway, maybe let you riff off of that and see where we take it.
Well, I think it's interesting because we had an experience recently. I'll tell you a quick story that gets to messaging and how you can be off in your messaging without any clue that you're not hitting the mark. So about 2 years ago, another advisor and I met with a prospect, and we talked for probably an hour and a half specifically about his business, about the challenges that he was going through, the things that they were struggling with, the areas where they needed to grow. And we kind of dove deep into maybe 3 or 4 different topics. And so we presented, that, well, this is what we do. We've helped all these other companies to overcome very similar things, if not the exact same thing. And here's what it would look like to work with us, and here's the pricing and the investment, and here's what we would recommend. And we didn't close that client. When we had an event just this past week where we invite a small table, it's called a round table, but it'd have to be a pretty big table to be round because there are about 14 people there. But it's a smaller, intimate gathering. We've done events for 40 plus people But this is a much different feel. And so it's usually, in this case, maybe 4 or 5 advisors, wealth managers, commercial business bankers, and then some of their clients, and then some business owners who were interested in coming as well. And this one individual came and or was on the invite list, but he called us prior to the event and said, "Hey, I just want to be clear. Like, I am not in a position to hire you guys right now. Just circumstances in the business, and I don't want to take somebody else's seat. I know this is an event meant to generate business, and I respect you guys. I want you to do well, so I don't want to take a seat if you've got somebody else." And so we said, no, please come. I think you're going to get value out of it. It's going to help you, whether you hire us or not. You're come and add to the discussion, but also take away some stuff. So we hand out these cards at the end of those events, and it just gives the attendee an opportunity to fill out their information, say, this is an area that I could really use some help in. Here's the best way to contact me. So this gentleman turned in one of those cards. And so the other advisor, we were having lunch after the event, after all the guests had left, and going through the cards and talking about, who needs to follow up with who. And he goes, I don't know what to do with this, because a week ago, this guy said he was never going to hire us, but he just checked like every box and said, contact me, email, text, phone call, I need to talk. So he goes, I'm kind of confused. So he talked to him the next day, and the guy said, I'll back up and say that first conversation was all about specific issues in his business. This whole workshop session was on increasing the value of your business and what does that. And so value drivers to increase the value of the business. And, for a lot of people who are thinking about exit, that's hugely important. But even for people who aren't necessarily mindful of exit, they all want a healthier business, a more valuable business. So it kind of has a focused appeal if you're in a certain chapter of the business, but there's also a broader usefulness to the topic. And so when our advisor called him back, he said, I didn't know this is what you guys did. We should have hired you like 2 years ago when we first talked. And I'm like, what in the world? What did we miss? We talked specifically about his needs, his struggles, his challenges. And then we put together a workshop that wasn't about him at all. That was probably going to be about some of the people in his space. And his response back to us is, this is the stuff that every business owner wants to know. Every business owner wants to know how to make their business more valuable. And so it's just, to be honest, it was like a lot of our calls, this is therapeutic for me. So maybe we'll just call this therapy. But I'm just, I'm struggling with the thing that resonated with him was not talking directly about his business and his challenges and how we could help that. The thing that really resonated with him is, I want to make my business more valuable. If you can help me with that, I should have hired you 2 years ago. And somehow we missed that. And I don't know whether it's because we got into solution selling during that time frame and we were being guilty of zeroing in on problems we could solve rather than what's the underlying thing that, if those problems are all solved, would be next. And I wonder if that plays a part in kind of mining the core messaging that's going to resonate with your ideal customer, because they're all going to have, if an attorney practices in contract law and a client needs a contract completed and whether they've done business with this person or not, and another business owner says, oh, you need that new lease reviewed, call Joey, he can review that lease for you. You're going to get the call. But that may not be the ideal client for that particular contract law attorney. What they might really want to do is set the table for very successful partnerships and shareholder ownership relationships through, great operating agreements, great bylaws, great governance structure, great compensation agreements, golden parachutes, whatever, equity buy-ins. That's their sweet spot, right? So it's like, well, what is the thing that's going to bring people in your door or give you the opportunity to call them? Might be a pain point now, but if it's not, once that pain point's solved, do you still have a reason to be around? And I'm just wondering for at Axiom, how much of our business development efforts have been too focused on mining specific problems that are present now, but in the business owner's mind, those are acute, but if they've been in business for any length of time or any amount of size, they've developed a pretty good confidence in themselves. They're going to be able to solve pretty much any problem. They just haven't
Yeah.
been able to solve it yet. So they're sitting there thinking, yeah, I'm telling Joey about this acute problem that I have, but we're going to fix that, right? I don't
Right.
need his help to fix that.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
It does, 100%. Yeah. I think that comes back down. So if I could paraphrase perhaps I'm hearing, and then identify where we want to go with that. It's you know when you when you get in under when you create a conversation under a very specific uh, thing, a problem, and then if you only focus on that problem in that one chance you think you have, you don't leave the impression that you could actually help in a bunch of other areas, and you might lose the opportunity if they decide against going after that particular problem right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, so for me, I have found, and part of this is breaking things up into two buckets. One would be, organic methods of business development, and you've mentioned networking opportunities, getting out to events and different things like that, just creating relationships. And I would argue that's bucket number one. Bucket number two is leveraging, marketing to leverage marketing to help generate conversations. So let's just have those two buckets, and then they come together in our sales process. And where they come together, no matter if they've come in through marketing or they come in through organic conversations, they come together at what I call the diagnostic conversation, which is your opportunity to dive deeper. So at you're at an event, and someone says, "What do you do, Joey?" Or maybe we'll use me as the example. What do you do, Chris? Well, I help owners of boutique consulting firms get over feast or famine so that they can scale and grow their businesses. That's interesting. Tell me how you do that. Well, number one, right there at the networking event is not the place to get into that. So you want to bridge that. And the best way to bridge, I call it the valley of death, because if you say too much,
Like
if
it.
you say too much, you'll spin them out and he'll never follow up with you. But you want to just simply say, why don't we get together for coffee and be cool about it, be confident about it, and he or she will take you up on that, exchange business cards, get together, maybe it's a Zoom call or whatever. So you're at the diagnostic conversation. On the marketing side, if you pick a handful of pain points and you market the problem, and then you leverage some assets, whether it's a white paper or case studies or some asset, a webinar or a video, and you let that piece do the work, and then you do some follow-up or they book calls with you. Again, now you're at the diagnostic conversation. And the diagnostic conversation is really, in both cases, I would argue if it's done right, you are positioned in a similar energy to a doctor is to a patient, as opposed to a sales maggot talking to a prospect. You're the subject matter expert, and so you should. I'm not speaking at you. I'm saying we should be going into these diagnostic conversations similarly to a doctor talking to a patient. Ask questions to uncover the gamut. Like, tell me about the story of your business. Start off with that. What's the story of your business? Where are you today? Where do you want to be in a few years' time? And when you're listening to that, you're able to identify all kinds of like little things they say that is multiple symptoms of problems, and then you just decide what ones you want to go a little deeper on. And I would say, you mentioned earlier giving away free stuff. Rather than, you got to try to do your best in diagnostic conversations to not give away the solution. The best diagnostic conversations are when you listen, you ask questions, and you agitate the problem to figure out, are they motivated to solve that problem, right? And so you ask further emotion-based questions like, what does it feel to own this business for 10 years and you're struggling with profitability? Are you losing sleep about that? With that, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
picking examples, but ultimately if you're opening things up, yeah, because the one thing about human nature is that we all love to be heard. And so when you listen and you agitate and you ask them personal questions as you build more and more trust, the natural reaction to that is they feel heard for the first time in a very long time around their problems. And the difference in that approach versus a salesperson's approach is they go in and find the first little gap and they start selling to that gap because they want to get a sale,
Mm-hmm.
right? I would argue play the long game, build trust, build credibility by doing the hard things, like asking the challenging questions, because that's actually does build trust. It might feel uncomfortable to us to ask the questions, but as we do it more and more, we realize there's actually a huge reward to doing it because they feel heard, and they say, and the natural reaction eventually is, God, Joey, you really get, and you haven't even said anything. All you've done is ask
Right.
questions. And they say, God, Joel, you really know me. How do you help? How would you recommend we help? You help us. And away you go. So that's the diagnostic conversation. And I'll just say then, and I'll let you speak now. Then you move into, well, what's the easiest path to getting in there? Well, I call it the wedge. You want to wedge yourself in there, and with a offer that is digestible, that they can say yes to with relatively low friction, so you can get in there and you can start to get to know the organization better. I say the ultimate asset you can help an organization with initially is a roadmap. Get paid for that roadmap, and then they look at you. And say, now you really know our organization. You got to help us with this roadmap, because they don't want to let you go then. And
Yeah.
that is obviously a very high idealistic sales process, but you got to start. Anyway, I'll take a breath.
One of the things I really took away from what you said is the goal of that diagnostic conversation is not, I mean, the ultimate goal, obviously you want to get the business, but the
Yeah.
thing that's the thing you're thinking about without thinking about it, right? You're constantly evaluating, constantly qualifying, you're constantly gauging, are they leaning in, are they leaning out, are they giving me buying signals, are they not? So we don't even have to think about that. I think the harder thing to think about is are they motivated enough to solve the problem to do anything about it? That's the thing that you really ought to be more present with when you're trying to ask those follow-up questions. And I think it becomes easier. I'll say from my perspective, I'm more of a problem solver and less of a kind of relational, empathy-driven type person when it comes to those conversations. I'm looking for a really meaty problem that's costing them a lot of money, and we can prove an ROI out. But when I flip my thinking to say, I got to dig into this problem to see if they're motivated enough to do anything about it, then it's very easy for me to turn that same problem solving ability or thinking intellect into trying to discover what are the emotions behind this. Is it really that big of an issue? Is it something that they know that I want a problem to sink my teeth into, so they're throwing me a bone? They're not really motivated. It's not going to make a difference in their life. So I like that. That's something I'll take back to the team and just say, hey, when we're
Yeah.
doing these discovery calls, which is what we call that diagnostic
Right.
conversation, we talk a lot about slowing down for yellow lights. It's a concept I
Yeah.
got out of a book by it's called "Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play." I
Yeah,
can't
you've
remember the
mentioned
names,
that one too.
but that our natural tendency when we see a red light on the street start to turn yellow, we accelerate through it because we just want to get through it.
Absolutely.
And in this analogy, when we experience yellow lights in sales conversations, we have to slow down. Let's go ahead and stop, and let's examine the yellow light and see if it's actually a red light or if it's not something we necessarily need to be worried about, and we can proceed. And I think
Yeah,
that
I
motivation piece is a big one.
just a data point. and I forget the reference. Maybe I'll dig it up for you. But there was an analysis of top sales conversations in professional services, and the analysis of what percentage of time was the seller talking versus the prospective buyer talking. And in the selling of a professional service, the knee-jerk reaction would be, well, they're selling themselves, so they should be talking 75, 80, 90% of the time because they're selling themselves. The best sales conversations turned out that the seller was talking 27%, and the buyer was talking, well, whatever that is,
Yeah.
63%.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny because we have this experience where like my business coach was one of the best business coaches I've ever worked with, and I probably talk 90% of the time. So I'm basing my
Right.
assessment on 10%, maybe 6 minutes of every hour we spend together is him speaking. And I think he's amazing. Right. And
Yeah.
so that just goes to prove your point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean that's it's I'm really passionate about this subject. It's a human problem, as opposed to say not software. Maybe that's not a great example, but selling sneakers, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're selling based on features. You're selling based on yeah, those more tangible things. The thing about selling professional services, you're selling the intangible, and so it's a human problem. It's a human thing,
Yeah, as you were talking, I was drawing, a lot of parallels and a lot of value points out, thinking through the perspective of some of our larger clients, and I think there's a price point in like product based businesses where this maybe isn't the case,
Mm,
but just because it's $100 pair of sneakers or $200 pair of sneakers, um, which sounds crazy that I would say that's not a lot of money, but I've seen what people spend on sneakers and it's
yes.
crazy. But my point is, it's like, well, do I really need to trust the person selling me the sneakers? Because I can go online. I know how sneakers are made. I know where they're made. I know the different brands. I can compare them to each other. But you get to things that are either so technical or such a high price point that human element becomes very important because the risk that the buyer is taking is so much greater. It's a risk that's almost visceral in terms of, it could, they could spend a lot of money and you could rip them off and that could put them in a very precarious financial situation. The stakes might be very high if you're hiring a professional. And it's like, well, if I hire the wrong person, I've wasted the time and I've wasted the money and I haven't solved the problem, which is costing me even more money. And I
Yes.
think about, like we've got roofing clients that, they're nowadays a roof on a residential home can easily be $30,000 for just a
Absolutely.
shingle roof, triple that for a tile roof or a metal roof. And so you go, well, the person needs a roof. Right? But the truth is, they can get a roof from anybody. What are they most worried about? They're worried about the anxiety of going through a major construction project, the anxiety of laying out all this money, the anxiety of not knowing whether whoever they hire is doing a good job or not because they have no basis for, they're not a roofer. They don't know whether they're putting in inferior material or installing it poorly. Or we go to like, I was thinking about clients that we have that are in like the plumbing and AC space. And I call because, I have an issue with the toilet. But really, what the thing that I haven't said is that I've got issues with the other 2 or 3 toilets in the house, maybe down the road because they were all put in at the same time when the house was built. And, the water spigots on the outside of the house are getting gummed up. And I'm not sure what kind of state the drains are in. Like there's all these other things, and they send a technician out, and the technician thinks just like a technician because that's what they're good at, and they want to solve that one problem, and they probably got 3 other calls waiting up in the queue that they got to get back to. But how much of a difference maker would it be to train people on this skill set of connecting with the buyer and
Mm.
finding out? I know you have a specific problem. You've already agreed to pay us to do that, but what else is there that what other needs might you have? Or stopping with a roofing customer and saying, "This is the first roof that you've ever put on a house before?" Because for a lot of people, it is.
Right.
Have you ever been through this process before? Do you know what it looks like? Is there any questions you might have for me? Just, whoever
Exactly.
you hire, I can kind of tell you how it's going to go if you're
Yep.
nervous about that or wondering how long it's going to take to schedule, that kind of stuff. So
Exactly.
all these principles, like you said, they're human principles. And to the
Yes.
extent that we are interacting, people for buying from us are human beings, we're going to have this whether it's professional services or not.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now you opened up the conversation about scaling, like as companies grow, professional
Mhm.
services companies grow. One of the things that does happen as you do grow, if you and you start to look up market, is you start to move into potential clients that I'll put in the bucket of more complex buying decisions. Governments, big enterprises. Let's maybe we'll just say, $50 million business plus, and the bigger they get, the more complex they become. And so, as professional service providers, um, we got to be conscious of that, and it shifts from selling to an individual to selling to a committee. And in that committee typically is different buyer motivations and different roles. You might have technical buyers, which are more procurement oriented people. You might have um, users, the people who are day to day interacting with your service. And then ultimately you have the economic buyer, who is the person who officially says yes, signs the PO or signs the contract or whatever. So as you grow as an organization, you make a conscious decision to swim upstream in that. You do want to start thinking about how do you integrate, an approach to that, a methodology for that, and because you want to wrap your arms around the account as opposed to only, like, a lot of sales are lost because you focus on one individual buyer and make a lot of assumptions around that buyer and thinking they have all the buying decision authority. I was talking to a client just a couple of days ago, and she's the owner of a small marketing agency, and she's selling into an organization of about 100 people. And she was referred in, and she focused on who she was referred to, and she put her probability at 95%. And then she lost. It turned out she lost the business, and it was simply because there was a highly influential technical buyer in the process who had a preconceived notion or preconceived idea of the direction they should go. And that was a blind spot for my client. So looking at complex buying things, decision processes is very important. I just maybe want to point that out. We're
Yeah,
dealing with
we've
different.
run. I would say that that's an issue regardless of the size of business that we've learned the
Yeah.
hard way too. And typically in our world, it looks like we sit down with the business owner,
Right.
and then sounds great. I really like what I'm hearing. Need to go talk to my partner or talk to my spouse about it, and let's touch base 48 hours.
Exactly.
And we've learned, and we didn't get a lot of those deals. And then it's like what I might call, there's the economic buyer that we were talking to who's going to
Yeah.
like and I think a lot of people have figured this out the hard way too. Like if the economic buyer is not in the room, that's a yellow light. Like, you slow down for that. Let's maybe bridge to another meeting, like you said, where we can get the economic buyer in the room if they're going to be part of the decision making process. But a lot of times we get the economic buyer in the room and we're like, all right, let's go all in. This is our opportunity. And we are blind to the fact that there's an emotional buyer that probably is way more important to win over than the economic buyer. And the spouse of the business owner for us is often that emotional buyer. And it's
Exactly.
really interesting. We can have a meeting with the economic buyer, and the emotional buyer isn't in the room and we don't get the business. We can have a meeting with the emotional buyer and the economic buyer is not in the room and we do get the business. And this just happened at an event we did last week where one of the cards that was turned in, the lady who very successful in her industry, really like what she's doing with her organization, and she came up and handed a card. And my first thought was, well, this is one of her clients that she's going to refer over. She goes, this is my husband.
Yeah.
He needs your help. You reach out. I will make sure he takes the call, and I will get him, where he needs to be to hear what you guys have to say.
Love
And
it.
so, like, that's where I go, well, what's driving that? What is the thing that we are missing when we're just meeting with the economic buyer? And some of it you can cover in questions like, can you tell me about your decision making process? Can you describe what that's going to look like when you walk out of this room, just so we understand it? But that's more of a technical answer to get to the heart of what does it mean for you not to move forward in solving these problems? What's the
Yes.
price that not just you are paying, but the people around you are paying, who are
Right.
rooting for you to solve this problem, or who are nagging you to solve this problem, or who are giving you ultimatums to solve this problem? And I would
Exactly.
say that's an area that we need to do a much better job at Axiom of digging into with these prospects, because I think that's where, if you leave a meeting and you're going to spend a lot of money, these big problems are going to cost money to come in and have somebody help you do it. But if you feel lighter emotionally walking out of that, you're spending future money. That's one of the things that I heard Dan Miller say a long time ago, is like, you're spending the people who are buying, they're not buying with today's dollars, they're buying with tomorrow's dollars. They're looking at how much better they're going to be with the outcome that you're going to provide, and that's the money that they're spending.
Yes.
So that getting that emotional weight off the shoulders really gets to the heart of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, and I just want to point out that I think it's important that we gotta build up our confidence. I think it's Dan Sullivan, the owner of an organization called Strategic
That's Dan
Coach.
Sullivan, not Dan Miller. That's who I was trying to quote. Dan Sullivan's the
Oh,
one
really? Oh, Dan
who
Sullivan.
said, yeah,
Okay.
your clients purchase with future dollars. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. Yeah. So Dan Sullivan, he talks about, you know, uh, what comes the first, really, right? So as an organization, we want to embody a belief that we have the ability to solve our clients' problems. And behind every business that we're trying to sell to is a human being or a series of human beings that are carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. They're losing sleep. Uh, they need to be challenged. And we're the people who can solve that problem. If they and we gotta help them buy as opposed to try to sell them. And so helping them buy might involve being a bit tough, right? And so if you go into a meeting and or you're prepping for a meeting and you don't think the emotional buyer is going to be there, or they haven't said the emotional buyer is going to be there, or economic buyer, or whatever the right combination is, you put you I love your analogy of the yellow light. I mean, it's like pump the brakes. Your time is valuable, and say, look, in order for us to have a good productive meeting, um, you know, for the a win-win meeting, then let's have the right people in the room, and they will respect you for doing that. So what I brought up Dan Sullivan because so the question becomes, as sellers, when when do we have the guts to do something like that? Because we want to keep the lights on. We feel like we got to sell because we got to meet payroll this month or whatever, and we don't want to throw away good opportunities by pushing back like that. Well, Dan will say, well, the reaction he'll get is, yeah, I'll do that once I have the capability. And capability is actually a reward for actually doing it, right?
Hmm.
And so, okay, so that means then, okay, I'll do it when I have the confidence. So train me how to do that. Confidence is a reward for doing it. You got to do it to get the confidence. It ultimately comes down to the third C. I think there's a fourth C, but I'm bashing this story. But really, the big C is you got to do it. You got to have the courage to do it, and you just got to do it. And you capability and confidence are a reward for the courage to do it. And so as we grow our businesses and we want to take on an attitude that our time is valuable and we're in this to serve the ideal client, to challenge them. You just got to have the courage to do it, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, maybe bringing this full circle back to your feast or famine messaging that gets to the heart of what you provide for boutique consultancy owners. When you're in that famine state, it's really hard to have courage. It's really
Absolutely.
hard. It's, we call it commission breath or you call it whatever. Like the prospect can sense it when you really need the business. And it's through developing this deliberate, constant practice of always working on building your client base, your customer base through acquiring the best customers possible on a consistent basis that you after over a while after our time you're like, well, I have 3 meetings a week or 4 meetings a week or whatever the number is with new prospects, right? That's the discipline that we've built, that we're doing the things to generate those meetings. We book the calls, and so you walk into any one of those meetings, well, it's one of 4 meetings that week, but there's 4 other meetings next week, and there's 4 others the week after that, and there's 4 others the week after that. And so you find yourself walking into those saying, one, the most important thing, I can be here for this person. I can really put my ego, my needs, my plans, my desires aside. And I can say, I'm going to bring me, the knowledge, the experience, the group that I represent. I can bring that to the meeting because that's what they want to meet with. But I'm going to be here in that capacity for them. I'm going to really care about them. I'll make an effort to understand them as best as I humanly possibly can over the next hour, hour and a half. And once you've done that, or I guess why as you're doing it, that position is a result of all the things that you've said.
Exactly.
You've had the courage, you've got the confidence coming in, you've committed to the change even though it's hard. But I think like you can't overstate the upside from just a closing rate or new business development rate, but more importantly the fulfillment of just going into those meetings knowing that I'm here to care for this person, I'm here to find ways to encourage, support them, provide some insight, provide truth. I mean, I think that's the other thing that you said that is so important is just be truthful with them. If there's a hard thing they need to hear, like they need to hear it, it's gonna, they may not enjoy it.
Yep.
Trust yourself to be winsome and diplomatic and empathetic enough to deliver it in a way that it can be heard and not abrasive. But one of our guys said one time, we were struggling to close a prospect a couple years ago, and it was like we were debating, like, well, what we really just need to say, what we'd really like to say is, whatever it was. And it was kind of a hard truth. And he's like, well, why don't we just say that? He's like, they're not a client. It's not like we're losing a client. Like they're not a client now. If they don't become a client later, nothing has changed, right? But you're saying that we need to say this for this person's benefit. So just go say it. There's nothing to lose in this situation.
No.
And those words stuck with me, and I remember them ever since. When I'm in a situation where I need to challenge somebody who's not a client yet, it gets harder after they become a client because now you do have something
Yes.
to lose. And that's the other
Yeah.
thing that this is a whole different conversation. But
Yes.
if you're not willing to say something that could lose you the business in our business, you're not doing your job. Right.
Right.
It's just, you got to bring that kind of value. So I love the fact that we come back to find the need that really resonates with them, but it resonates with them because they're a human being. If you're not seeing the human being, then no sales technique in the world, no funnel in the world is going to be able to get you out of your own way.
No, no. And I'll even bring that to a point, just a universal principle, the law, and it might get a bit overplayed, the law of attraction, where we live in an attraction-based universe. Like energy attracts like energy, and we all, we're operating at a vibration that attracts all the same vibration to us. So we just got to realize that and embody that. I'll share one last thing with you, or it would go as long as you want, but you prompted me there because I've been, as you're analyzing going into a meeting and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm here to serve, I'm here to, the word intention comes up. And so you're going into a meeting with the intention to serve. And so I've come up with this acronym for a diagnostic, or you call it a discovery conversation. Um, IROS, I, little I, R, big R, rapport, U, uncover, S is summation, and the other S is solution. So if you look at a good diagnostic conversation, and let's look at it through the eyes of a doctor, intention to serve. It happens before the meeting. It's the waking up in the morning, looking at your calendar and saying, I've got a meeting with Joey today, and I'm going to lean in and use the best of my abilities and my strengths, and I'm going to serve him in the best way I can. And the best way I can do that is to help him solve his most pressing concerns. And so that's intention. Rapport, spend a few minutes building bridges
Mm-hmm.
and talking about everything but work, family. I have another acronym, form, family, occupation, recreation, and motivation. So talk about those things, and then bridge into the uncover, which is everything we've talked about, the questioning around all the different parts of the business, uncover the gaps that exist. And then when you listen and you hear it, you summate, you summarize what you've heard. And it's in that's the sales pitch. The summation is your sales pitch. It's what you've heard. And then they lean in and they say, God, Joey, you really get me. You're like a fly on my wall. How do you help? And that's where, whether you do it at that moment in time where you pitch a solution, which is the last S, or you say, let me go back to the office and give this some thought. Let me consult with our team, and let's have another meeting. Little tactic there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Never leave a conversation or a meeting without another one scheduled. Never go into the valley of death on purpose, where you feel like you got to be nagging to follow up and get another meeting. Have it already scheduled before you leave that existing meeting. Um, and then there's no, you continue with the momentum. It's like mini action commitments over a period of time that leads to the bigger sale. Anyway, wind me up and get me started on
That's
all
good.
these things.
You
Keep
gave
going.
us two great acronyms, so we'll make sure that those are in the show notes.
Yeah,
But I really want to thank you, Chris. This has been great. I've learned a lot from you personally, so I'm glad we got to spill out some of the stuff I've learned. So broader
yeah.
audience, we could have just recorded all the calls that you and I had and published those. That would have been good too. But I appreciate you coming. And if you are interested in a deeper dive on some of the stuff that Chris talked about, we'll put all of his contact information in the leadership guide for this episode. So the leadership guide is a downloadable 2 to 3 page PDF. It's going to cover all the salient points that Chris and I talked about. We'll cover those two acronyms, IRIS and FORM. I love the FORM one too. That's a great one in terms of conversation with folks. So we'll cover that. But the leadership guide is also a tool that you can use with your team. If you've got a team that needs to hone in on some of these skill sets or frameworks that Chris has talked about, especially if you're professional services and you're looking to improve that feast or famine kind of cycle that you've been going through, there's some stuff that our team is going to put in that leadership guide where you can discuss it with your team. There's some exercises you'll be able to do. If it's just you sitting down personally reflecting on it, there's going to be some great questions that our team comes up with after they dissect this episode, and you can download that from the website. It'll be in the show notes. If you're interested in having that leadership guide delivered to you every time we release a new episode, you can give us your email address. We'll go ahead and send you the leadership guide, and that's kind of your prompt that there's a new episode that's dropped. Let me go listen to it. If you are interested in diving deeper, just go back to your inbox and pick up that PDF and run with it. So you can do all that on our website. Last thing, if you like what you're hearing, if you like what you're seeing, leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. I think Apple Podcasts is probably our biggest download source, but also Spotify. This video, if you're watching, it's on YouTube, so you can leave us a review there. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again, Chris, and
You're welcome.
we will see you next time.